Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Coming up on the Payoff, it is time to revisit our conversation with Dave Kushner. A lot of you probably weren't subscribed to this podcast when we listened or when we talked with Dave back in early April, and this conversation really will blow you away. He is a rock star, legitimately, right? He's won a Grammy, played with Velvet Revolver, started his career playing with Wasted Youth, went to high school with Slash from Guns N' Roses fame, and now he's making his own music, and he also creates music for soundtracks, for films and television shows, did the theme for Sons of Anarchy, much, much more. But most importantly, the dude's been sober for decades, and this conversation is awesome. Looking forward to next week. We've got a Major League Baseball guest who's awesome, and he's sober for a while, and he's sober in Texas and Austin. And I'm stoked because I had a chance to hear him speak a little while ago, and he was cool, man. He just wrote a book, and we're going to talk about that too. But we're going to talk about Dave Kushner now, and Kushner, an L.A. rocker. So from one L.A. rocker to another, you know who's coming up now, folks. Kevin Souza. Mike is, by the way, he's the producer. He's listening in. He can hear us. Say hi, Mike.
What?
Yeah.
Hey, man.
All right, Dave. Want to start? First of all, thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course.
It means a lot. People that carry the message, and your message starts with your sobriety date. So, can you give that to me?
February 11th, 1990.
So, how many? 31 years?
Yep.
Wow. What's it like to be sober for over 3 decades?
It's crazy. I got sober when I was 23, and so I remember the point where I was like, wow, I've been sober half my life. It's just the way it is now for me. I don't really think about like how it is or how it isn't. It's just how I need to be, for me, because I know that, I know in my gut, in the deepest part of my being, that if I started drinking today, after I did this podcast and was like, oh man, it's really nice out, and I live in California and it's hot, and there's some beers in my refrigerator because my wife drinks, and I would drink those beers, then start drinking tequila, then probably throw up because I haven't had alcohol in my system for 31 years. Then I'd pass out, and then I'd wake up tomorrow and I'd need a Bloody Mary, to take the edge off. And I would just be off and running, just like that. No, I've never understood like casual drinking or social drinking. For me, it was like, I'm going to drink because I'm going to get drunk. I don't necessarily want to pass out and throw up in your living room, but I want to be drunk. I want to feel the effects of the alcohol. And it was never like a kind of more social thing for me. So just knowing that, I just know that I got to do certain things to not end up there.
And you talked about the way you feel or the way that you think, right? You just want to get drunk, like that brain chemistry. When was the first time you got loaded?
I think the earliest memory was when I was 12 or 13, and I think I had a baseball coach who was, I think he was only like 19 at the time, and we won like the championship for Little League. And it was funny, dude, because we had yellow and white uniforms just like Bad News Bears, and we all fucking drank beers, Like it was totally a scene out of Bad News Bears, and I think that was my first beer. But also, you hear a lot about people that are sober and they talk about like, oh man, the first time I had a drink, I finally felt comfortable in my own skin, and I finally took all the edge off of my stress in my life, whatever stress in my life or stress of my surroundings. And that wasn't my experience. I just liked the way it made me feel because everything was like shinier and more fun and more relaxed and whatever. But it wasn't like all of a sudden I felt like I, fit in, or all of a sudden I need this thing for the rest of my life to feel comfortable in my own skin. That just wasn't my experience.
But you're 12 years old. You enjoy it, right? At that point in time, you don't feel like you need it. Whether you ever do, we'll find out. It's like the late 70s in LA?
Yeah. I mean, at that point, dude, I was just playing baseball and football at public parks, and rec leagues. And that was my whole thing, going to public middle school, junior highs in the middle of Hollywood. A couple years later was when I got into punk rock, and that was like 83 or something when, the punk scene kind of was really like flourishing, I guess, in LA, when all the bands like Black Flag and Circle Jerks and Fear and all those bands were playing like local clubs. And, then that's when it started kind of really, I don't want to say spiraling, but just got a little
spiking.
Yeah, it was fucking really got a lot bigger and more able to try out different things and different drugs and different kind of things. So
you were in bands. You're a performer at a young age. Did you find yourself the drinking and the usage kind of progress?
Not necessarily. Like I was in bands and stuff, but a lot of it I was just going to clubs, and hanging out and being a little punk rocker. And so
you're just like a fan.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to. Yeah, I mean, I was just into going to clubs.
And the punk rock scene, they weren't really fans. You were a part of that scene.
Yeah, I think so, because it was like everyone was kind of on the same level. You know what I mean? Like the bands would get off stage and then they come in the crowd and then they just hang out, and everyone was kind of, because it's kind of the antithesis of that putting something on a pedestal kind of mentality. It's like everyone's one, and I just hung out a lot, see the same group of people. We're all friends. We go to see bands, we play in bands, we drink, we, do drugs at clubs. And
did you feel like at any point during this time, and this is maybe before you perform or start performing, that you're starting to just kind of use it to feel better, or you're using it to be in front of people or in relationships?
I didn't consciously do that at that point. It's so weird, man. When it really, I remember like being in like ninth grade, maybe, is where I started like smoking pot and drinking more, and like after school, sometimes even before school. And it was just something that was fun to do, that made me feel different and relaxed, and, like why people just smoke pot or whatever. And, and then the harder drugs just were so readily available in that scene, so easy to get and so inexpensive. And there were so many people at those clubs that just had stuff, whether it was acid or PCP or pills or whatever. And
hardcore,
yeah, coke, heroin, whatever. And so people just did it, and it was just kind of like, oh, this is going to be fun, and really that was the mentality. And it was fun until it wasn't, later. But at that point, it was just, a good time in, a scene where it was acceptable.
I want to backtrack a little bit. Was there alcoholism in your family at all? Like for me, it's all over my family, my dad's side. So like my mom used to give us a heads up, like, hey, you've got this stuff. You need to look out for it. Did you have any awareness of anything in your family if it was there?
The only one that really had like, I think that was really alcoholic was my grandfather, or my mom's dad, where I'd heard some stories where he was pretty gnarly. Like, they would like, there was some abuse going on and like hiding under the bed when he came home and, that kind of stuff if he came home drunk. And so I knew that existed, but not really from my mom and dad. And it's funny, I remember I had this buddy Victor, he was from New York, and he had that kind of childhood growing up, like what I described that my mom had, where he had the alcoholic dad and the alcoholic mom, or the severely Al-Anon mom and the alcoholic dad. And and the thing is, dude, the thing about being sober and doing certain, whatever road you choose to go down to achieve and maintain your sobriety, it was funny because we realized like it really doesn't matter like where you come from or what your background is or what your story is. It's like it's the same feelings. It's the same, it's the same alcoholism. It's the same, things you use to fix it. It's like, one guy could come from this background, one guy could come from the opposite background. But once you're, sober or dying of alcoholism, the feelings are the same.
Yeah. Is Victor a sober guy now?
Yeah. Victor's got 25 years or something.
When did you start to see it getting out of control where there's a point, not necessarily the jumping off point, right? Like in the literature, but even the point where, man, I'm losing my grip on this.
I think right around 2021, where, you move out, you have to get a job. I had just kind of whatever jobs at first, in 17 and 18, working at theaters or, at a donut shop or, what a pizza delivery guy. I remember I ended up working at Tower Video in Hollywood, across the street from Tower Records. And that's kind of when I noticed it, because I think because my life was settling into a more regular thing where I, worked 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And I started to see like, oh, wow, this is kind of affecting my relationship with my girlfriend at the time. Or wait, this is like in the movies where she's starting to mark the bottles of alcohol on the bar, like in the house.
Yeah.
Which is another thing I never understood, like having like a little bar area in your house. I'm like, why are you putting all this alcohol like just out? Like, what am I supposed to do? Not drink it? Like it's for, and and I remember like putting water in the bottles, I remember finding the marks and just like, and then thinking like, wow, this seems kind of, might be a little problematic here.
Yeah.
Cause it's like, if I see this in the movies, and I remember I started blacking out a lot. And I remember being in 8th grade and seeing this, reading this health book, when you have health class.
Yeah.
And that for some reason that always stuck in my head, that like one of the signs of alcoholism was blackouts. And so as soon as I started blacking out a lot, I was like, oh man, I wonder if I'm alcoholic, and that's kind of when it started, and then slowly it just turned into, really starting to do things that you never planned to do. That was like the beginning of the end for me, was like a 2-year period where, right from what I described to where it slowly started to get like, oh, I don't feel good about that. Like stuff that wasn't okay with my own like moral compass yet.
Stuff you're ashamed of.
Yeah. Exactly. That's it.
And you do stuff you're ashamed of, and you kind of, for me, it was like I would do things I was ashamed of, and then I'd drink behind that to squash those feelings, and then it just became this perpetual nightmare. Slowly but surely.
Yeah, same thing for me. Exactly. You know, the last 2 years was just like waking up to exactly what you just described. You know, you wake up, you're like, forget what you did, or, you know, I had a roommate at the time, same guy that I lived in that, same guy I played on that little league team with. And, you know, he would either just give me the disapproving head nod, just like, dude,
Yeah.
what, tell me what I did. And there was a point too, you know, where that's when I really just started drinking like every day, all day long, period. Blackout, pass out, wake up, drink, go to work, drink all day, pass out, you know, that like for the last 2 years, that was every day of my drinking.
Were there consequences over the course of those last 2 years? Anything major?
You know, for me, it was like, there was all, like you said, you know, there's all the shame. Like, I never woke up in the morning and thought, oh, I'm going to crash my car today, and I'm going to steal some stuff from my mom so I can buy some drugs, and I'm going to make out with, you know, your girlfriend when you go to get something out of your car, or I'm going to, you know, cheat on my girlfriend, or like none of that stuff was okay for me to do according to my moral compass, yet eventually I was doing that kind of stuff on a daily basis. You know, showing up late to work, lying constantly because I was always late or didn't show up, or, you know, just being late on my rent every month and not paying my bills and getting my cars impounded because I didn't pay tickets, and, you know, and then it just got progressively worse, like car accidents. Thank God I never, you know, hurt anyone or myself, more importantly, anyone else, but never got a DUI, but I crashed all these cars, and for some reason, like, I would get out of it somehow. And, you know, then it became like I lost a girlfriend at the time, and then I lost my license, and then I totaled my car. And then one time I played a club on Sunset Boulevard, and I'd been up for a couple of days on speed and drinking, and I ran across Sunset Boulevard, and I was so drunk that I just like face planted on the middle of Sunset, and I had my guitar in one hand and my amp in the other hand, and I just like was like Jesus Christ pose face down on the street, and knocked out like all my front teeth and cut my lip. And, you know, even then the next day, dude, I woke up and I went to the hospital. My couple guys in my band took me to the hospital. They took me to Cedars. They stitched my lip back on, and
jeez,
I just waited there, and the doctor didn't come back, and I'm like, yeah, fuck it. And I just left and told my friends, I'm like, come on, let's go. And we left, and the next morning I was trying to drink a 40 ouncer of St. Ides, but my lip was so swollen it was touching my nose, and it just all dribbled down my shirt. So like I found a straw in my apartment, and I was laying sideways on this couch that was really low to the ground with the St. Ides 40 on the floor and a straw, drinking this fucking, you know, this St. Ides, because that's what I did. Kept drinking for another 6 months after that.
How hopeless are you feeling?
Oh, I wanted to either put a gun in my mouth, which I would never do just because I didn't have a gun or have the guts. But you know what, man? It's just like I wanted to unzip my skin and crawl into a fucking drain pipe and just die in the drain pipe because I hated myself. That's the bottom line. You know, I hated who I had become. I hated, you know, it wasn't any one huge thing. You know, it wasn't me knocking out my teeth. It wasn't me losing my girlfriend. It wasn't me crashing my car. It wasn't me, like, you know, my mom would still talk to me and my dad, although you could see the kind of disapproval. But there's certain people that didn't want to be around me because I was the drunk that would like, that was kind of happy, but I would like if I saw you in a parking lot of a club and I hadn't seen you in a long time, like I would run and like tackle you.
Yeah, I used to do that. Yeah, yeah.
You know? Like, oh, dude, and then my knees are bleeding, and then I'm passed out. Someone throws me in the back of a pickup truck and drives me home and whatever. So it was just a culmination, you know, of just like day in and day out of that thing you described, you know, that shame, and then more shame, and then more shame, and then more, until, you know, I'm like, I just hated myself, and I didn't see any way out of it, and I was totally hopeless.
Just following you and listening to you, you know, you have that first drink when you're 12 years old, you're playing baseball, and you just won a championship, and you said you didn't do it because you felt uncomfortable in your own skin. But then you get to this point, right? This monster that's addiction, where and you want to be anywhere but your own skin. And it's because of this stuff that you thought was a good time. Or, you know, for me, my brain told me this was going to be so much fun. And then I needed this, and then I deserved it. And then all of a sudden I couldn't stand anything, including myself.
You know, I've heard this thing about this concept of, you know, there's like a line between heavy drinker and alcoholism. And, you know, like, I just wish, well, I don't think even if someone showed me the line, I would have stopped there, you know, at that point. You know, I'd just been like, okay, cool. And then just kept going. But there was a couple times in that last 2-year period where I did like try and stop, you know. But another thing that happened was, so I had that roommate, his name was John, and he was from my Little League team. He was my best friend. And then his sister lived across the street. His sister would come over and we'd all drink together, and she would take pills and stuff. And she actually OD'd in our apartment, and she got sober before I did, like 6 months. And she, you know, she lived, with the paramedics came and took her to the hospital and whatever. And, you know, even then I was like, and she would come over and say like, hey, I'm going to, you know, that I'm going to a meeting. And I'd be like, oh, all right, that's cool. And she'd be like, come on, you should go. I'm like, just get the fuck out of my apartment.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, why? You know, even though, you know, I should have gone, or I was dying and bloated, you know, gained like 25 pounds and busted teeth, and, you know, I was a wreck. And
are you playing a lot of music at this time?
Yeah, I was actually in a band called Wasted Youth.
Okay. So you're experiencing success in your professional career, but your personal life is in the toilet.
Yeah, I don't know, like not huge success, but yeah, you know, it's like a little punk rock band with a record out and playing shows, and, you know, things were. Then I got in another. Oh, and then what happened was, so I'm totally hopeless, don't know what to do. All I know is like every Sunday is the worst day of my life, because I know that on Monday the process is going to start all over again. You know, that feeling like, God, I just want to fucking be dead, but now I got to start my week over again, doing the same shit and the same stuff that makes me ashamed of who I am, and it was just totally hopeless.
Are you still working at Tower Video at this time, and then just playing at night?
I was, yeah, and I was in a band, another band after that. What happened was, should I get sober now in the conversation?
Yeah.
Or
Well, you can keep going. You can keep going. Whatever way you want to take it. I'm really enjoying this.
Well, what happened was, I was in a band with a guy named John, a different guy, John Feldman. He's a producer. He was sober, and he was, while I was hitting bottom in the band, you know, and I would drink at rehearsal or do drugs, and he'd be like, dude, you just not do coke at rehearsal? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And, you know, but he never really got on me, you know, and he just did his thing, and he was doing his sober thing. And I was like, and he was like a really cool example of, you know, like, you know, you want to burn yourself out, or you want to die, kill yourself, that's cool. I'm going to go and I'm going to do my thing. And he ended up being the guy I called, you know, when I was sitting on my couch with alcohol poisoning for the, you know, 20th time. And, you know, I had that moment of, I guess, a moment of clarity, as corny as that sounds, you know, but I was sitting on a couch trying to drink this Miller Genuine Draft, because I knew that that's the only thing in the world that's going to make me feel better.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I couldn't physically keep it down because I was, had alcohol poisoning, and I was just sitting there like at this impasse of like, fuck, I can't imagine living the rest of my life like this. But I also can't imagine not drinking for the rest of my life. And I was just, kind of sitting there like with this half drank beer in my lap and trying to figure out how to keep it down. And I ended up calling John, and I just was like, dude, I think I want to go, to a meeting. And it was great. He was so excited. Like, he was just like,
yeah.
Really? He's like, okay, well, let's go. Okay, so just don't drink today. I'm like, I already drank. He's like, all right, well, that's okay. Go to sleep, and then tomorrow I'm going to come pick you up, and we're going to go to a meeting. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I went to sleep, and then, we went on this shitty little motorcycle he had and just hanging on for dear life on the back, like bloated and busted teeth and long hair and just feeling like, and then I, went, just immediately was like, this is what I need to do.
So there was no comparing yourself out when you got there. Like a lot of alcoholics, when they show up, give themselves every reason to leave. You were not like that. You had that gift of desperation.
Yeah, I had the gift of desperation. I had the gift of not being that smart as far as, because there's a lot of stuff in certain these programs and stuff where, there's like people that are just too smart, and they try and find loopholes, or they try and find they try and they doubt the process, and they kind of go, well, I don't know. I mean, this book's really old, and these guys, like, I don't relate to them. Whatever it is, I was like, I'm fucking done. My life sucks. And if you guys got any solutions, I'm fucking all in. If you told me to go put this funny hat on, go outside and wash your car and detail it, and then can dance in the middle of the street with your shirt off, and then come inside and eat a whole pizza, whatever it was,
yeah,
I was like, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you tell me to do.
Well, it's such a gift, right? That sometimes you get beat your ass so bad into submission that you are willing to go to any lengths and take suggestions. And that's what happened for me. So my behavior changed, and then everything in my life slowly started to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny though, because I remember that saying, like, are you willing to go to any length? And I remember hearing that early on in my sobriety, and I was like, and I just pictured like, wait, does that mean like if some guy's really in a bad way, like I'm gonna have to go to a donut shop at 4 a.m. and meet him and have a conversation with him?
Yeah.
Like I had these like funny warped versions of what any lengths meant, but I didn't want what I had, and I was willing to do whatever I did, that's what I did. And I never drank since that first meeting, I never did. I've been sober the whole time, because I did everything they told me to do when I got there, like they said, go to meetings, do this, get commitments, help people, get phone numbers, blah, 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 show up early so you can pay attention. All these things that they told me to do, I did without question.
You go to meetings and you start to act different, right? You start to dry out. When do you start, this is like 1990, when do you start to feel better? Like when does your soul start to get filled? How does that change take place?
Well, I'll tell you, like, I remember very clearly because, I still go to the same deal that I did, from the beginning. I remember that I felt hopeless when I came in the day before. A couple of things I remember from that early sobriety was, one thing I remember when I came in was they said, you never have to feel as hopeless as you did the day before you got sober ever again. And I can say, in all honesty, in the last 31 years, I've never felt that hopeless and that shitty any days in the last 31 years. And I've had some tough times, but never that degree of hopelessness. Like my life is just going downhill and there's nothing to do to stop it from going downhill. But I remember feeling like a scumbag because of all the stuff I had done, all that shame, those years of shame piling up. So it's like, it's tricky because you come in and you're like, now I just feel like a sober scumbag, because your head tells you like, you're still that guy that did all those shitty things. And so, luckily at those meetings, there's a lot of tools to remedy that and to deal with that feeling of feeling like a scumbag. And, also, like I felt hopeless, but I would get these like windows of hope every day. Like I'd get 10 minutes, like, oh, maybe it's going to be okay. Yeah. And I'd feel kind of shitty the rest of the day. And then, it'd be 15 minutes and then it'd be 5 minutes. And then and that just kept slowly, increasing. And the amount of hope that I would get, sometimes it was for an hour and a half at a meeting where I wasn't thinking about my life and my shitty situation and myself and whatever. And I was just hearing stories and meeting people and just being like, oh man, this feels good, or hanging out with other sober dudes. Luckily I was in a band with a guy who was sober. He was in his first year, and then we got a record deal and we got to go on tour together. And I learned so much from that guy because he was really diligent about finding meetings and going to meetings on the road and, looking shit up in the phone book and being like, all right, dude, I found a meeting. You want to go? And I'd be like, no. Every time. He's just wired to say no. And he'd be like, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to go anyway. I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll go.
And that's the best part, when you become wired to say yes and you start to flex that muscle. Like if I go out of town and I travel, I am pretty good at looking it up online, when we could go in person, and just I have smart feet. Just go to the meeting and figure everything else out later. Because a lot of times I've sat outside meetings and been like, I don't want to go in there. These people aren't like me. And like, it's like, just park the car and go inside. And it changes everything. And you do that enough times, right? You've got a body of work to build on.
Yeah. I love that thing, dude, smart feet, because it's like I've heard it so much, and it's just like it really is, that contrary action. Like, look, I accepted from the beginning, like I have alcoholism, and it's this thing that lives in me that's trying to kill me. Period. The reason I'm talking to you today is because I don't want to die of alcoholism. You know what I mean? Like that's why after all this time, I'm still. If someone says, hey, you want to talk to, I got a buddy and he does a podcast and it's about, sobriety and blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. Otherwise I'd be like, all right, thanks. I'm good. I'm going to go on with my life now. But I just feel like I know, like I said in the beginning, I still have this thing, and this thing affects my thinking as well, and it's like you perfectly described it. I can be at a meeting that I go to on a regular basis, and if my head's not right, my alcoholism will tell me like, oh, well, after the meeting, it's like, oh, you don't really fit in with those guys because those guys are all still in bands, and you're not really in a band anymore. And, like those guys are all like a little older than you. That's that little clique, and it's like this whole dialogue about how I don't fit in with any of the little groups that are talking after the meeting.
You'll take yourself out either way, whichever group.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't fit in there. I don't fit in there. I don't fit in there. And then I just leave, and then I feel sorry for myself, and then whatever. And that's why I still have to do a lot of stuff I did in my first year that I learned to do, whether it's meditation and stuff like that, or going to meetings or helping other people. I still have to do that stuff because I still have alcoholism, period. And so it's just that simple to me. And it's always been that simple for me. It's like, my sobriety has been very pragmatic. It's like, you tell me if you move that pile of stuff over to there, then you're going to feel better. I'm like, okay, cool. I might not move it right away, but I'm like, I pay attention. I'm like, okay, cool. Just move that over there. Yep. Okay, cool. I'm going to do it. If you show up here, you're going to feel better. Okay, cool. If you do this, read this and do this, then you're going to feel better. Okay, cool. And that's how it's been. And it's never been wrong. That's the crazy thing. All the suggestions, all the stuff always makes me feel better. It's never been like, oh, I tried that. It actually backfired and I actually felt worse. It's never happened one time. That's why I keep doing it. You know, I remember when I was newly sober and someone said, hey, you want to go to a party? And I was like, no, absolutely not. No, they're like, come on, it's like a sober party. I'm like, that sounds horrible, you know? And I think I had like 2 months or something, and my sponsor at the time was like, hey, let's go to a party. And I was like, oh, God, it sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm so afraid, you know, like how to just be around people and be social, whatever.
So you shit on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I remember him saying to me, look, do this. Let's go. We don't have to stay long. He said, look for the most uncomfortable looking person in the room and go talk to that person. He said, look for someone that looks as uncomfortable as you are and go start talking to that person and be of service to that person by talking to them. And I was like, okay. And I tried it and it worked. You know, I saw some dude and he looked all fucking by himself and looked awkward and uncomfortable. And I started talking to that guy and then I felt better. And then he felt better. And I felt better because I made him feel better. You know what I mean? It's just like a fucking win-win.
Yeah.
And that's my experience in all of these things. If I'm helping someone, I'm not thinking about myself. And I'm usually, you know, and I feel better. If I give someone hope that they have 2 weeks sober, they don't know how they're going to make it through week 3, and I give that person some hope and tell them like, dude, it's going to be okay, whatever. Here's what I did, you know, and then I see the light come on, then I feel like a king. There's no better feeling. You know, I've gotten nominated for an Emmy and won a Grammy and had a #1 record and all this shit, dude. And I can promise you that giving someone hope that they're not going to fucking die and that they're going to be okay is a better feeling than any of those things.
The fact of the matter is you go to meetings for over 30 years or you stay sober for over 30 years, right? You're going to see people go out and die. Like that happens.
Yeah, for sure. And dude, I grew up in Hollywood. You know, me and Slash went to junior high and high school together. There's a lot of people. We went to school with Hillel Slovak from the Chili Peppers, the guitar player that OD'd. We went to school with, you know, a lot of people. My best friend, that guy John that I told you about, that was my roommate, that we were on the baseball team.
Whose sister OD'd? Or the guy before that?
Yeah, no, that guy.
Okay.
And he and I were best friends until 10 years ago. Our kids went to the same school. We shared a studio at the time, and he went out of town one weekend. I saw him on a Friday, and then I got a call on a Sunday that he, you know, had an accidental overdose. And that was like probably the hardest death I've had to deal with in my sobriety. Because, I mean, I was, you know, 44 years old, and he was my best friend since I was 13, you know, and we were roommates for years, like 15 years off and on. We shared a studio where we worked together. Like I said, our kids went to school together, and I was devastated. And then my mom died like right around the same time. So like what I was saying earlier, it's like, you know, I've been through grown-up stuff.
What do you do when the grown-up stuff happens?
I mean, I'll tell you, man, that stuff happened. And then like I had 2 kids right before that. Dude, a year before that, you know, I had 2 kids. My kids were 1 and 3, and my wife got cancer. She had breast cancer, and she had, you know, it was like probably the toughest year of my life because she had a double mastectomy. She had chemo, radiation. Like, she was really fucked up for a year, and I had these 2 little kids to take care of. My son was super colicky and irritable all the time, and it was really hard. And, you know, thank God she's all right now. But, you know, I remember going to some meetings. I remember going to this meeting and just being like, and sharing, it was like this crosstalk meeting where it's like a room full of guys and there's no like leader really or speaker. It's just like a big conversation almost. And you kind of wait till someone's finished talking and then you jump in and whatever. And I remember talking at this one point, I'm like, God, my head, the inside of my head is like a fucking circus right now. You know, like I can't even think straight. You know, my wife gets mad at me because I don't really show any emotion because I just have my head down and I'm just like all fucking task oriented. Like, you know, I just need to get this done and I just need to, and these kids, he needs to eat and she needs this and blah, blah, blah. And me and my wife would fight a lot in that period. And then so I felt guilty about that. This older guy in the meeting like leaned down the row. I was sitting and he's like, "You going to any morning meetings?" I'm like, "Oh God." And this is it, dude. This is a perfect description of alcoholism. I mean, this was like, 10 years ago? I've been sober for a while at this point. And I share in a meeting that I have a problem, that I'm really like kind of falling apart here. Some guy who I respect, who has more time than me, leans over and asks me if I'm going to any morning meetings. And for the rest of the meeting, I tried to figure out how to get out of going to a meeting with this guy at the end of the meeting, because I knew at the end of the meeting he was going to ask me about or tell me about some morning meetings that he went to, and I was trying to figure out how to get out of going with him. You know what I mean? Like I asked for help, the guy suggesting help, and now I'm figuring out how to take it back and not accept the help. And by the end of the meeting, I was just like, I had nothing. I had no excuse. And he's like, "Oh, I go to this blah blah blah." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Why do you get so and so?" I'm like, "Okay." And I went, and I felt better. I started going to more meetings. Like I started going to some morning meetings, and that's where I met Frank.
Yeah, my man Frank, who put us in touch.
Dude, and it's like, I don't know. Everyone's got a different concept of God or Catholic God, Protestant God, no God, Buddha, whatever, the guy with the ocean, the higher power, whatever it is, like, that's cool. I choose to call, my thing God. And it's just like a dude in the sky that looks after me, that's like pulls me out of the deep end when I ask for help. That's it, and I just believe, like, it's like this golden thread that's woven throughout your life. And it's just like, I wouldn't be talking to you now if I wouldn't have shared that my head was like a circus and that guy leaned over and asked me to go to the morning meeting, and the morning meeting is where I met Frank. And then, he and I became friends. And even though he lives back in Philly, we're still friends. And then he introduced me to you, and here we are.
Yeah. And hopefully we're helping people.
Yeah. And that's how my whole history of my life has been, especially since I got sober. Especially, once I got out of my own way, it all changed. I have an incredible life, and I don't always remember it, because I get so caught up in my own bullshit.
Well, I don't remember how good I have it until for me, it's like I'll go to a meeting and I get recalibrated and I get perspective. I'm not programmed to think about other people. I'm not programmed to think with gratitude. I have to be around guys like you, the program and spirituality to get my head right. I mean, my first thought is wrong. We hear it all the time, but that's how I'm wired. I mean, I got a whole body of work in drinking and using that speaks to that. And even in sobriety, right? When I'm not conditioned spiritually.
Yeah, dude. And like I'll just tell this one quick story. Like, I was in Velvet Revolver. I stayed sober through the whole thing. Everyone else didn't at different times. And I did. And I did it through doing the same shit that I did in that first year. Finding meetings on the road, opening random books and reading pages and still talking to dudes and staying current with other alcoholics and doing all the same shit. I just kept my head down and did the same thing. And, after that band was done, I was like at this kind of impasse and like, fuck, what am I going to do? And I remember thinking like, I'm gonna either like try and produce stuff, which I really had no experience doing, and then or like be a composer. And my buddy John, the one that died, he was a composer, and I just asked him like, what did you? Because that's what I learned to do in the meeting. You want to learn how to be in a monogamous relationship? Go ask that guy that's in a monogamous relationship.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, don't ask your fucking friend that's sport fucking every girl that comes to,
And if you ask me about something and I don't have the answer, I guarantee I can find somebody else in the program that does have it.
And that's how I was taught, like I will do whatever I can to help you. And if I don't have experience, I'll help you find someone that does. Because I never talk about my opinion because it's just bullshit. It's like, I'll tell you what I did. I'll tell you what, I went through if it relates to what you're going through. And I'll tell you what I did and how it worked, but I remember being at Johnny Rockets, this burger place out in LA with a few musician friends. And this guy said to me, this guy, Bob, was like, hey, I just got this job doing this, for this show. It hasn't started filming yet. It's called Sons of Anarchy. And, it's kind of about these bikers and it's like Hell's Angels meets The Sopranos and blah, blah, blah.
Turns into a huge hit.
Yeah. And we're talking about music and I'm like, oh, what about if you got bands like, because he was the composer and music supervisor. And so he's like, so I started suggesting all these bands that I thought fit the vibe, like Monster Magnet and Clutch. And what about this band? And he's like, and so he said, hey, if you ever want to get together and write something, let's, you should come over. And I was, as I'm wired, my first thought was no.
Yeah.
Fear. Like,
totally. I'm listening to you. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, this guy's way better than I am. He's older. He's a better musician. I am fucking not capable of being in a room with one other person. And, I don't want to be that exposed. I don't want him to find out like I'm not as good as I think I am or whatever. And, I've been programmed here to take contrary action. And I said, yes. And I said, yeah, cool, man. And then I made it, time and I went over and we wrote the theme song for Sons of Anarchy like that first day. Like I had that riff, I brought it over, we wrote the song in like a day and that was it. And that changed the trajectory of my life, and now I've been working as a composer for 10 years. And it's because of that thing that I learned in those meetings to take contrary action, to say yes when the fear tells me to say no. And that for me was the biggest example that I've had in my life of that contrary action working, for me as a positive.
I got a couple more things before I'll let you get on with your life. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
How do you, you're mentioning, I know about your career and the successes you've had. You've been in some of the biggest bands in the world, really. And you stay sober through it all, but you stay humble. I mean, I've talked to Frank about you. I mean, and every guy that was that you spoke with that was on that meeting. I mean, how do you maintain your humility through all this?
I don't know, man. It's not. I don't think it's by virtue. I think it's just that I came into this. It was just like it's that golden thread. It's like I knew Slash since I was a kid. We grew up together. I knew Duff because I was playing with him at the time. But he and I had become friends because we were into like the same movies and stuff. And then Matt, I just knew from around. Scott, I knew because our old bands used to play together. So even when I first went and played with Velvet Revolver, it was like I was comfortable because I knew everyone, but I was also the guy that was way, like had nothing. I had no money. I had a job. I made $6 an hour, and these guys all had fancy cars and they were at another level. And I I think for me, I just came in with a good cachet of sobriety. When I got in Velvet Revolver, I was already like 13 years sober. And I had been doing all the stuff. For me, it's just like, I remember that word humility. I heard it when I was new, and I was like, oh. And I associated it with being humiliated,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I looked it up in the dictionary. My sponsor was big on looking shit up in the dictionary. And it said, being meek and being humble, and it wasn't a bad thing, and for me it was just like, I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of trying to find an answer, but I don't really know. Like I've just always been, I've never had a huge ego about stuff. I've just not wired that way, and I've I know I'm good at some things, and I know on paper I've had a lot of success, but I don't know. Like I said, I had a lot of years of experience knowing that the better feeling comes from helping people rather than from getting stuff, because the stuff is always temporary, and the fucking helping people is free.
Yeah.
It's like, I have nothing. I can go to a meeting and help someone and feel better and feel like a king and still have nothing. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't fucking matter what I have, where I'm at in my life. If I'm helping people, I'm going to feel better.
Dude,
that's free.
I always tell people when I was at the end of my rope, I went to treatment. I had some things going before that, and I get to treatment, and I'm one of those situations, you've heard the story before, you go to a halfway house afterwards, and they tell me I have to get a job, and I ended up working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? I'm like 30-something years old, and it was the most fulfilling thing for me because I would really feel on top of the world. But I had a sponsor. I was going to meetings all the time. And I sometimes look back at my sobriety and I think that's the best I ever felt. 4 months sober, busting my ass, just being grateful to be working the drive-through window. So if I'm having trouble today, I got to figure some stuff out.
Yeah, it's great, dude. I love that. And it's that. It's like I've had the same sponsor, like some dude that helps me with everything. And for like the last 28 years, same dude. He's from Jersey, Italian dude from Jersey. And I remember when at 3 years sober and I first started working with him, and he goes, man, now that you're sober, man, your job is to be of love and service. And I was like, what? And he goes, that's your job, man. Just be of love and service to people. And I was like, okay. And I remember I would call him and I'd be all upset and I'd be like, oh, this fucking guy, blah, 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 blah. And he'd be like, what's your job, man? And I was like, oh, in service. And it's that thing, dude. It's like exactly what you're talking about with 4 months at KFC. It's like, if I can get out of my own way, put my ego aside and just think, how am I going to help this person? And if I live my life like that, and obviously I'm no saint and I fuck up all the time and I, yell at my kids sometimes or fight with my wife and whatever, but if I can always do the work to recalibrate and go like, okay, how am I gonna, like right now I'm in my studio, it's in my house, how am I gonna walk out of this room and help my family? How am I gonna be of service to whoever I run into first? Then I'm not thinking about myself and what I want to do next and what I want to get and how am I going to get it and how am I going to get time to fucking stare at my phone for God knows how long, like all this inane bullshit that I think is important, instead of, oh, I have that buddy of mine that just went, on some job in Vancouver and he's stuck in quarantine, in a 14-day quarantine, and I got to call that guy back. He's sober and he's just sitting there in a fucking room by himself. Oh yeah, I'm going to help that guy by seeing how he's doing because he's just stuck in a hotel room for 14 days. That's the kind of shit where that's how I stay right-sized, But I forget it all.
Somebody comes into a meeting and they're just not sure, Dave. They're not sure they're an alcoholic. Somebody that's listening today and they're on the fence. Now, what do you tell somebody about the life on the other side of sobriety? Or the other side of addiction?
I think like I think now that I've been here for a long, like in the beginning, I was really like, oh, I gotta save this person's life, like really, it was really like a heavy thing for me. I remember I had a girlfriend, and she was like, there's this guy, and he's at this treatment center, and he's gonna leave, and I gave him your number, and I was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna save his life? And I realized that I've been here for so long that it's like I can't save anyone's life, like I'm not that powerful. I'm not. I can help people. I can share my experience. I can share my own strength and hope, and I'm sure I've helped some people. I know I've helped some people along the way, but I can't save anyone. And it's like now I just, I remember someone telling me, like, look, because I would get frustrated because then I would help someone and then they keep going back out, like drinking again. And then they come back and I'd help them. And I'd spend all this time on the phone. And they go back out. And then they'd call me and be like, can you meet me here? And I'd be like, okay. And then they wouldn't show up or whatever things. And I remember my buddy saying, like, dude, you got to help the people that want help.
Yeah.
And like, you got to, you can't just keep helping the same dude. Like, and that wasn't a good really way of telling that story. But the fact is like, I remember when I was new, they would say, like, just real matter of fact, like, I don't know if I'm, like people that were on the fence, they'd be like, look, why don't you try this for 30 days? And if you don't like it, we'll refund your misery. That was like the greatest I heard when I was new. It's just like, try it. If you think you're alcoholic, you probably are alcoholic. If you think you have a problem, you probably do. And what's the worst that's going to happen? You might feel better if you try it for 30 days. And if not, cool. What have you got to lose? It's that feeling exactly the way you feel now, which is the reason why you're here.
What's your life? What's your life look like if you're still drinking and using?
Oh, I'd be dead, dude, for sure. Are you asking me, like, me?
Yeah, I mean, you just answered it. I mean, that's my answer, but I'm always curious to hear what people might say.
It's exactly what I described. I'd be off and running. I'd drink today. I'd throw up. I'd go out tomorrow. I'd drink a Bloody Mary just to take the edge off. I'd drink all day long, and then I'd look for some Coke so I could stay up longer, so I could drink more. And then I'd think, like, oh, I never tried ecstasy. I should get some of that. And and I'd be shameful right away because I'm have to tell my wife and my kids, like, or hide it from them. And then what? I'm driving. So then the only time I could drink is whether I'm in the house and I'm hiding it from them, or I leave the house and then who knows what's going to happen. I end up in jail because I killed someone in a drunk driving accident, or it's like I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say, like, like I used to drive with and I would see 3 of everything. I would have to close one eye, because I would, just so I could drive. And it's like, thank God I didn't hurt anyone, thank God. And, so that's what I did. I don't have any delusion that I wouldn't start off right where I left off, because that's been my experience. There's once in a while I see someone that goes back out and drinking and does the right about face and they're cool. And I'm like, all right, that's cool, man. But for as long as I've been around, living in the same city that I grew up in, it usually doesn't work out that way. It's like, it usually works out where jails, institutions, or death. They either end up back in rehab, they go to fucking jail, or they die.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that's been my experience way more than, I just decided I don't want to drink anymore. I'm cool. All right, cool, good. If you have a drink. And look, dude, I don't have any judgment on what, if someone's an alcoholic or heavy drinker or fucking drinks and throws up once in a while and, whatever. I don't care. Like, if you think you're alcoholic, then I don't know, maybe you are. Like, that's cool. If you want some help, I'll help you. If you don't, that's cool. I'll still talk to you. Good. Want to get a burger? Cool. Let's get a burger. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
there's guys that come in and go out, and I'm still, I still hang with them. Some of them are, my best friends. It's the journey, and I'm here. It's like you said, man. There's no magic wand that I'm going to wave, but I can just always be there as a friend and as a representative of sobriety.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to try doing it, different than, that's how I did it. So I'll show you how.
Exactly. Dave Kushner, you're the man. Anything else? Anything you want to plug or anything? I really appreciate the time.
No, dude, I got nothing right now. I'm just, got a few.
You got it all, bro. Come on.
Living the dream, bro.
Yeah.
No, just got a few jobs in the works with this. I have a company called Monkey Mind Music Group, and it's just me and a buddy of mine that, we compose for TV and film. And I got, really, I'm starting the last season of Episodes for Family with Bill Burr. We start doing the music next month, and that's it.
It's great stuff, dude.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you, man. And I love the KFC story. And, glad you're still alive.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.